Very good evening, warm welcome, not just to Dan Really Likes Wine, but also to Norman Goodfellows and the flagship store in Fourways, which is home for the show this evening, because today I'm joined not just on the show, but also for a tasting by one of my favourite people in the wine industry. Holden Manz down in Franschhoek is a regular destination for the Nickel family, and Gerard Holden is the smiling proprietor, or at least he normally is. I'm not sure he was smiling the whole weekend, because Gerard, of course, is an adopted South African whose origins are England. And so we're going to have to talk a little rugby with him before the show is out. We will, though, once we've got the rugby conversation out of the way for the first 40 minutes or so, be having a look at Franschhoek, because Franschhoek took a battering just a month or so ago. Those storms that caused such havoc really did turn the town upside down. Some of the footage of the water flowing through Franschhoek was hard to believe. So how have things recovered? How is the town doing? Is Franschhoek back open for business? And how can we help support? We'll find out from Gerard today, as well as tasting some of his new releases and getting an update on the Holden Manz brand that just goes from strength to strength, before Gerard and I slip outside afterwards and go and join a crowd of happy wine drinkers here at Norman Goodfellows to taste through some of those new wines. And if you're not here and you're kicking yourself and you forgot to get your tickets to come through and join us tonight, you can see Gerard at WineX later on this week. Already WineX is looking like being a smash hit this year. Ticket sales are flying, and we're in for 3 great nights with Michael Fridjon and his team Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Gerard amongst the star attractions pouring wine over those 3 days. So Gerard Holden, lots of rugby, a little bit of wine in just a moment. First of all, though, let's have a... This is the competition we're running this month. Your chance to win with Avante. Dan Really Likes Wine and Norman Goodfellows. Avante is John Smith's brandy brand wine in its most formidable and potent manner. And this is on sale exclusively at Norman Goodfellows. All you need to do is buy yourself a bottle. You'll go into the draw, and your grand prize post-Rugby World Cup is an online session with myself and John over a few glasses of Avante, as we look back at the Rugby World Cup and get John's thoughts on both that and also the story of brandy. How did the 2007 Rugby World Cup winning captain find his way into the liquor trade? I think I can answer that in part, but we'll get the full answer from John with our lucky winner and guests, and that'll be coming up early next month. So you've got until the end of this month to get in store, buy some Avante, enter that competition, and join John and myself and a group of your friends of choice brandy to look back at the World Cup. Get those entries flooding in. And you can also get your tickets to WineX. Those are available at web tickets. Wednesday night's usually busy. Thursday night is particularly busy, and Friday night is normally off the charts. So that's what you want to be looking out for. Night out at WineX. Big crowds, great wine. What I love about WineX is that so many of either the proprietors or winemakers or combination are there themselves. So you get a really good feel for the different wine brands, the different wines being produced, and the stories behind them. Get there early, get your tickets well in advance, and join Michael Fridjon and his team, Santon Convention Centre, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this week. Tickets available at web tickets. And then Helderberg Fresh. This has always been a great deal of fun. Here go Jacobs and team with their Somerset West garden party. It's taking place at Lawrenceford, which is a lovely place for a garden party. It's 750 Rand a ticket, and that ticket gets you a day out, food, wine, and a beautiful location that tends to sell out rather quickly. There are still tickets available at helderbergfresh.co.za, but I suspect that won't be the case for much longer. If you are available, 25th of November, last Saturday of the month, helderbergfresh.co.za. Grab your tickets, head out to Somerset West. Lawrenceford headlining the wine. There's some great chefs involved as well, and the chance to have a very indulgent Saturday in a beautiful part of the wine world. All right, well, let's move just down the road from Somerset West and across to Franschhoek, and the English ambassador to Franschhoek. Gerard, lovely to have you. Well, let's get the difficult stuff out of the way, the elephant in the room. I thought we probably lost that game. I suspect you, like many England fans, thought you'd probably won it. It was what on earth has happened game for fans on both sides. Have you recovered as a rugby lover and a former rugby international yourself?
Just about, but
until I kept reminding you about it.
Started reminding me about it a few minutes ago. Actually, didn't start with me because I was flying back from Durban early in the morning, and I was sitting next to a very large Afrikaans gentleman who regaled me for 2 hours about how the Boks were going to put 50 points on England. So I got back home in not a particularly good mood, thinking, and it probably put my mind into a state that we were actually going to get thrashed. And then when the game started and we started to get ahead, I was, okay, we might do something here. But as you know, the Boks are incredibly strong, and I think the inevitable happened, to be quite honest, at the end of the day. I just hope they can keep it up for the game against New Zealand.
As do we. There are certainly plenty of nerves about. If I have a look at that win, had it been an England win, the tabloids would have gone mad, the media would have been excited, Steve Borthwick would have been knighted, there would have been lots of joy. But there's just something about a South African win in this context that I don't think even New Zealand can quite match, just in terms of how it seems to lift an entire country. And you've been in South Africa long enough, I'm sure, to appreciate what happens.
Well, actually, we were watching the game with some friends who've just arrived. They just emigrated here from Dubai, some English friends. And they were amazed by the way there's almost a religious fervour about rugby in this country, and how it sort of joins across all the different groups of people who live in this country. And it can be the guy on the street who's got a Bok scarf on, to the guys and girls in the pub, to the restaurants. Everywhere was full. It was just crazy. So even on Sunday morning, there were still people staggering around Franschhoek with Bok shirts, and I'm not sure they'd actually been to bed.
The parallel between rugby and wine is one from South Africa I make quite often on the show, or when I'm doing events that involve both. And that's because they're two spaces where South Africa consistently, if not punches above its weight, then certainly flies a flag really high. And if it's not us performing at a Rugby World Cup, it's another great South African wine winning an award, turning up on a top restaurant's wine list, having an impact around the world. Is it fair to say, you feel, that it's probably rugby and wine as much as anything else that are consistently doing South Africa proud around the world?
I think so. And also, I mean, just the natural beauty of this country, the way you can be, in the Kruger, you can be down in the Cape with the mountains and the beaches. And I think it's just an amazing destination that has so many things. It's got great food, it's got great wine. Unfortunately, it has great rugby, and it's good in a number of other sports as well. I'll get the cricket in first before you mention it.
I was going to leave that one for later. It is, as you say, a country of great beauty. Some of that beauty took a little bit of a bruising not so long ago, though, because we had some quite extraordinary storms. We're used to a bit of nasty weather in the Cape. It's not completely unusual. But what we got for this particular storm was completely unexpected at a new level entirely. That devastation to Franschhoek, just the photos look bad enough, the videos look bad enough. What was it actually like being there?
It was pretty scary, to be quite honest. The wind really kind of picked up at about 3 o'clock in the morning, Sunday night, Monday morning. And it sounded like there was a jet engine outside my bedroom window. And then all I could hear was trees falling over and splitting. And then I could hear the roar of the two rivers, which kind of meet behind our bedroom. And so, obviously I'd been following the weather, so I knew something serious was happening. But the intensity of the noise and the intensity of the rain was just incredible. Don't forget, it had rained all day Saturday with us and all day Sunday, and then this huge deluge on Monday. So we had 300 millimeters on the farm in 24 hours.
And how would that compare to what you might normally have in a month or a year?
So this time of the year, September, the normal rainfall would be about 200 mils for the whole month. 250 mils for the whole month.
So you got more than a month's worth in a night.
In a night, yeah. So you can imagine anything like that's going to do a lot of damage. And we had a full guest house. We had 12 people in the guest house. We had no staff arrive at work on Monday morning, so we ended up cooking breakfast for all the guests, which they enjoyed. And we got some booze out, and we thought, because we were trapped in the farm, we had 2 big trees down on the road outside, and so we thought, well, we might as well make the most of it. So we were pouring Cap Classique from JP Colmont and some rosé for breakfast. And then a couple of them were getting into the Big G around lunchtime. We cooked lunch for them as well. And then we managed to get out to the farm at about 5 o'clock and did a quick run to Woolworths for dinner because we were out of food. So that was kind of how it went for us. But we couldn't get through the main road. The staff couldn't get into work through the main road. The guests couldn't get out. We had people trapped all over the village. The village was pretty tough because they didn't have any water and they didn't have any electricity. So luckily, being on the farm, we have our diesel generator. So we had power and we had water because we bring the water from underground. So we were actually reasonably well off compared with a lot of people. I think the biggest damage or impact was lower down the Franschhoek River, so getting down towards Lou Estate and Rickety Bridge. Those guys suffered quite a bit of water damage. The train track that the tram runs on lost a bridge, which they're busy rebuilding at the moment. They've rebuilt half of it, and the rest of it will be finished by the end of next week. So they'll be fully operational again from beginning of November. The village kind of recovers quickly because I think the beauty of Franschhoek is it's a small community, and we saw it with the fires in 2019. The community really sort of gets round behind an effort and helps to tidy up, helps with refreshments. We had disaster management crews were out pretty early on Tuesday, Monday afternoon, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I think I'd say we were back to about 90% operation in the town by Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning. So it was pretty quick. There's still a bit of cleaning up to do, and obviously some places are going to be out of action for quite a bit longer. There's a couple of wine estates that suffered quite a lot of damage more on the sort of northern side of the mountains, but most of Franschhoek is up and running, and we've got people coming from all over the world. I left a full guest house this morning when I went to the airport to get my flight, and we had people from Middle East, from Abu Dhabi staying. We had some people from Germany staying, some from Switzerland, and some from the UK. So the international guests are definitely back. We had a couple of situations where people were getting the wrong message, and they'd obviously seen footage that had been taken straight after the event, and then this was being portrayed as new news, and they were sort of wondering whether it was safe to come to Franschhoek. But I think we've managed to get the message out to people that Franschhoek is definitely open for business and open for having fun and having a great time.
The recovery process has been remarkably quick, but there is still some work to be done, as you say. How much damage was done from a wine perspective, and what can we do if we'd like to help out some way in accelerating that process and supporting Franschhoek?
So I think the damage that I've seen to the vineyards has been more a sort of impact where they've had sand run off onto the soils. And obviously, if you think about sort of over time, over I guess hundreds of years, this has happened in the past. It's not the first time this has happened, because if you're on the floor of the valley in Franschhoek, then you've got sandy soils. So this is part of nature in a way. I think there's a few people are trying to dig out some of the sand, because it's not necessarily a great thing to have a blanket of sand over the vineyard. There is at least one newly planted vineyard I'm aware of where I think they lost a hectare of new plantings, which is obviously tragic, but better that it happened, when they were 1 year old rather than happening when they were 20 years old.
Yeah.
So that'll be a sort of replacement project for them. But I think generally the vineyards got off reasonably lightly in comparison with what could have happened. It could have been, catastrophic. But to have so much energy focused on a small valley was just quite. It's out of this world. I've experienced some big storms in my life.
Nothing quite like this.
This is what I imagine being in the eye of a hurricane was like.
Oh, it looked terrifying. It sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
Just to recap then very quickly, if people are watching at the moment, come down to Franschhoek, come and visit us, come and explore. We're open for business.
Absolutely. That's the best way to help. It's the best way to help the valley. It's the best way to help the businesses in the valley, the people who work there, the people who live there. Please come to Franschhoek and come and enjoy yourselves, and come and stay, come and eat, come and enjoy the wine farms. There's plenty of wine farms to visit. There's the mountain biking treks are mainly open. There's lots of things to do, horse riding. Basically, you can have a really good time. And of course, the shopping and the art galleries is there as well for people.
All right. The headline act for me, there's some great food in Franschhoek. It's a beautiful place. The galleries are terrific, but the wine is always my star attraction, which leads us rather nicely into a brand that just gets stronger and stronger, Gerard. I know you work really hard to get out into the trade. You're up in Johannesburg a lot. That brand building process isn't an overnight one. It's very incremental in terms of how you make it work. How do you master the art of the patience that is required in taking a brand slowly, step by step forward?
I think if I look back at the last 13 years since we started Holden Manz, it's actually gone really quickly. There were times when I was thinking, oh gosh, are we ever going to sort of crack this restaurant or crack into this market geographically? And just by, first of all, having good wine and having the ability to share that good wine with people makes a massive difference. And then being out there and seeing people and talking to them and having them experience it. And also, we're on the wine tram in Franschhoek, and we get at Holden Manz, we get about 20,000 people a year come through our little tasting room from the wine tram. So there's a lot of footfall. Approximately 45% of those people every year are from South Africa, and the rest are from overseas. So it does give us a chance to expand the brand both in South Africa, but also internationally as well.
The impact that it's had is, I think, considerable. There are a lot of people I now talk to the brand about, and immediately they know Holden Manz, they know about the style of wine you make, and they generally like it. It's wine they recognise, they have fun with. I think my wife probably headlines that particular list, which is why there's very rarely any left in my cellar, unfortunately. So she, like many others, will be excited to know that there is new wine on the horizon. New releases have come through, and I think the first one to have a try of is a space that you, if not made your own entirely, you've certainly staked a fair claim in the ground for it, and that is rosé. Go back to when you decided, right, rosé is going to be a big part of what we do, and what drove that thinking?
So, I mean, I guess historically we had a house in France, in Provence, and we had that house since just before 2000. And if you spend time in Provence, you're going to drink rosé, and so we were lucky to have experienced a lot of different rosé wines. Then when Thierry Haberer came along as our cellar master in 2014, Thierry obviously has a history of rosé winemaking. He comes from Corsica. His father was a rosé winemaker. And so it was a natural for us to combine our love of the wine with Thierry's skills. And we made rosé for a couple of years before that, but we hadn't really cracked it as I could see. And so we were over in France. We brought back 12 bottles of what we thought was the highest rated rosés from around Provence. And we studied them, we analyzed them, we tried to figure out why they were selling them and why they were successful, and kind of reverse engineered with our South African twist in there what we thought was going to be sustainably successful rosé varietals. So we ended up with the two different rosés. One is named after our son, Rothko, which we're going to taste in a minute, the new 2023 release. And that's a Grenache Syrah Sanso blend. And then the sort of the higher end rosé named after our daughter. It's got a very expensive bottle and a glass top and stuff, and as it should have for a young lady. And that's just Grenache and Sanso. So we drop the Syrah for that. It gets a little bit of oak exposure just to make it a bit more serious. And it's, I think of it, the hero, I think of very much as a sort of white wine replacement when it comes to dinner time. And the Rothko is a great fun wine to enjoy all day. We say rosé all day on the farm. And, we have American guests come to stay. They quite often ask for breakfast wine. So we give them the Rothko rosé with their breakfast, with their bacon and eggs, and they all seem to enjoy it. So.
But which I think is said slightly in jest, but it does speak to a changing understanding and interpretation of what rosé is. It was a wine that was often sold on a combination of aesthetics and diabetes-inducing sugar levels, and the more serious side of rosé, the more elegant style, the more reserved style, has become more and more shown, I think, from selling vineyards. What about the consumer education? Are more people understanding what rosé has to offer?
Well, I think the best way to look at that is to look at how our sales have developed. So 7 years ago, we produced 5,000 bottles of Rothko Rosé. This last year, we produced 25,000 bottles. So, and it's all pretty much gone.
Yeah.
So it kind of tells the story that the demand for rosé. I was in Durban last week and I did a number of events, and basically it was a consistent story there, because people tell me, oh, you'll never break into the Sauvignon Blanc market in Durban. But I actually found the Rothko Rosé was incredibly popular. So it's going into places that it hasn't historically had a foothold. And I think people have got over this idea of rosé as being sickly sweet and being sort of like nuclear waste, and much more into the idea that it's a dry wine, it's fruity, it's enjoyable, it's a wine to enjoy with friends, to have fun with. It's not a wine that you want to sit there for hours and debate, how long it should have had doing whatever. So we just want people to enjoy themselves. We want people to see the Holden Manz brand on there and be part of their parties, whether it's a family party or a friend's party, or whatever they're doing to celebrate, or whether it's just been a hard day at work and they fancy a bottle of rosé when they get home.
In that understanding of rosé, where does rosé sit for you as a food wine, particularly the two that you produce? And then what about the aging of rosé? Is it at a stage now where we can keep rosé for a few years longer and benefit from it?
Definitely. So there's one particular lodge in the Kruger which orders the Hero Rosé, and they've specifically asked for us to lay it down. So they're currently drinking the 2019 Hero Rosé, and they understand that aged rosé makes a lot of sense, as long as it's a good rosé to start with, and it's obviously well looked after between being put in a bottle and getting to the table at the end of the day. And I think international people are much more attuned to the idea of sort of aged rosé. I don't mean 10 years old rosé, but sort of 3, 4, 5 years. Allows the flavors to develop, and I think you get a really good drinking experience.
Been my experience so far. Let's see how it racks up against something that's fresh and brand new. Our first wine to try with Gerard today is the new 2023 rosé.
So this is literally, you're one of the first people outside of the farm to taste this one.
I'm duly honoured.
So this is, you see, it's the 2023 vintage, and as usual, it's got the silver R on the front for Rothko and for rosé, and it's got a nice label which works really well. This acetate label works really well when you're putting it into an ice bucket. It doesn't come off, and in fact, it's quite difficult to get off. We've tried a couple of times to take it off, but it didn't work. So there you go, Dan.
Thank you very much. So this is wine inspired by your love of Provence, your time in Provence. Whenever you're taking a style of wine from somewhere else, there's always a balance to be struck. How do we celebrate the best of what is done there while not trying to force something alien into our own space? How did you, Thierry, the team, achieve your balance here?
So I think the first thing was when we looked at the different rosés from Provence, we looked at the different varietals that were being used, and as well as we could do, we kind of tried to match those to our sort of region. So we wanted grapes, obviously, as you know, we grow Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and Syrah on the farm, and that all goes into our red wines. So we couldn't really use any of those components for the rosé, but through Thierry's knowledge of the industry, he has a great grower in Wellington who grows all three varietals on his farm. And so we kind of hijacked an area of the farm, and it just seemed like it worked. The combination of where it's grown, the sort of soil type that's there, the sun, the aspect, it just all kind of works. It comes together as a nice combination. And I think it's a nice counterpoint to have the hero without the Syrah. So the Syrah kind of gives us a little bit darker color. The hero is a little bit lighter. I think Grenache, Syrah, Sanso, they're three varietals that have South Africa stamped all over them. So I think it's definitely proudly South African as a wine, in spite of its Provençal roots.
The viticulture process, which winemakers in their usual humble style will insist is where all of the wine comes from.
Course, yeah.
If these three grapes were being produced for a regular red Grenache or Syrah or Cinsault, would that viticulture process change as opposed to what they're being used for here, which is producing a rosé?
So yes, I mean, ultimately we're obviously bringing the fruit in earlier than if it was for a red wine of any of those three components. We pick each one of the varietals when we think they're ready. So we're obviously looking for a specific alcohol level, specific levels of sugar, of richness. We don't want too much in the way of tannins coming across. So that kind of dictates when we do the picking side of it. The rest of it, in terms of the viticulture, Thierry likes to manage the canopy pretty strictly, and kind of often seen on our vineyard going through the rows and plucking leaves and stuff where the guys haven't done the job up to his standard. So I think it's just generally good viticulture practice, but knowing exactly when to pick.
And then the style, you've got a blend here, which is going to change a little over time. How much is it going to change from vintage to vintage? Is it very much we want to create this style each and every year?
Yeah. So pretty much we've got a core recipe which is broadly 60%, between 50 and 60% Grenache, between 20 and 30% Syrah, and the balance Cinsault. So that's the broad blend. But then the blending process for rosé really starts off. It's like a 4-stage process for us. So we focus on the color to start with. We want to make sure that the color is going to be attractive, that people go into a shop or they go into a restaurant and they see the wine and they immediately want to drink it. So that's the number one, is getting the color right. Secondly is about getting the nose right. So as soon as you take off that screw cap, the nose is coming out of the bottle and enticing you to drink it. Thirdly is the mouthfeel. We want a really nice round mouthfeel. We don't want any bitterness or any over acidity there. And then finally the finish. And as I said, we talk about rosé all day. And, I don't want to sort of go down the route where we put people off drinking rosé because they start suffering from heartburn, So we really do road test it quite hard to make sure that it is capable of being drunk all day.
Spoken from someone who's got a bit of experience of doing exactly that. There are often questions to be asked on the show that I think people would maybe feel a little hesitant to ask, because they think, well, I should know the answer to that. I don't want to sound stupid, so I'm not going to ask that question. So I shall sound stupid on their behalf and ask it for them. The colour of the rosé. Historically, it was Dayglow Pink, it was electric, it was Kylie Minogue's Pop Socks from 1982. Yeah. Now it's very different. It's got a far more restrained and elegant hue to it. What dictates that colour? And is there a direct correlation between colour and what you're getting on your palate?
Yes, in the short answer. So the bulk of the colour in this wine comes from the Syrah and from the Cinsault. So the Grenache juice, when we press it, is pretty much clear. So that's the first thing to kind of think about. The pressing that we do when we press each varietal individually, and we put a lot of dry ice into the press. And what that does is that reduces the amount of color that transfers from the skins into the juice. And so by doing that, we can control the amount of color that comes out of the skins, and we can drive ourselves towards this sort of pale rose gold color, which is kind of what we're aiming for. So there are basically 3/4 broad color palettes for rosé in Provence. And there's a kind of lavender hue, which is very, very nice and works well in a Provençal environment. I've not really seen any examples of that in South Africa, but this particular example, I think, is right in the sweet spot for what people want when they're looking at a good rosé.
There you go. Dan really likes wine. Wine School, continuing with Professor Holden from the University of Franschhoek. Speaking of Franschhoek, you've got a visitor on her way. Lisa Harlow is heading out to Franschhoek. She'd like to know, will these be available at the farm at the end of the month? She's heading out to visit. I would like to drop by.
I'll make sure we've got some for you, Lisa. Don't you worry. Yeah. We'll look forward to see you.
We'll send you the secret Dan really likes wine Norman Goodfellows discount code, Lisa. Get you sorted out there with Gerard. Before we move on to the Big G, the wine that my wife would attach to an intravenous drip if she could, and she's certainly not the only one. Food and wine is a love of both of us. You've very bravely eaten at my kitchen table a few times. What for you am I eating with this? And go with something more conventional, but then maybe something a bit left of centre as well that you might not imagine having with rosé.
So prawns on the braai is an absolute classic. It's going to win every time. A nice sort of avocado and feta and lettuce salad on the side, a little bit of dressing on it, and just a couple of bottles of this in the ice bucket, and you're sorted for a couple of hours. I think something offbeat. We were very lucky in Franschhoek to have a curry house, an Indian curry house, for a while. Unfortunately, they closed down, but because they lost their lease and not because of lack of support. And I actually used to enjoy drinking our Rafka rosé with one of their butter chicken dishes.
Ooh, so I can see that working.
That's quite a nice combination. Something a little bit spicy, a bit creamy spicy, not too overly sour.
Yeah.
On the palate, but something that's in that space will work well. Or a pasta, just a simple pasta, just with some cream and lemon juice in it, and a bit of salt and pepper, and you're away.
Yeah, it's got that little gentle ridge of acid running through it that's going to play off.
Just going to waken the taste buds up.
All right. So I think coming into this summer, it's something we're going to have a lot of time on with the show, is looking at rosé, and it's in its many guises, because there are so many people doing stuff with rosé at the moment, having fun with it. Some of the best pinotage I've had this year has come in the form of rosé. So look out for more rosé on the show. Look out also for more red blends. So let's head into one of those. The Big G, not too hard to work out where the name came from. I remember, as I finish off my rosé here, I remember talking to Ernie Else about starting his wine journey. And he sat down with Louis Stradham, who was then with Rustin Freda, and they blind tasted dozens of glasses, which in Ernie's case is not surprising at all. And they went through them, and it was just a case of what do you like, and he kept coming back to exactly the same style of wine, and that is what led to the signature. How does this blend, this Big G, carries your name proudly, how does that speak to your wine journey?
So I guess my wine journey started in Champagne when I was very young and 13, 14 years old, and I ended up staying for 3 months with a family who were Champagne producers. Mm-hmm. And so I got introduced to the vineyard and the cellar and the tradition of having a quick glass of champagne at 11:45 before we sat down for lunch. So I've always had this kind of love for good quality sparkling wine. But then I did a harvest in Bordeaux when I was 19, and then that got me drinking Bordeaux style wines, and that really kicked off. And then actually we went back and we played rugby there with London University the year after that, and so I kind of drank quite a lot of Bordeaux style wine when I was there. And I think I've always had a love for Bordeaux type blends, and then over the years I've just been very lucky. I remember one year when I was probably in my mid-20s, my father was good friends with a wine merchant in Bolton in the northwest of England, and they had this Bordeaux blend that they didn't know what to do with, because I don't think anybody else would buy it, and I don't think they understood what it was. anyway, it turned out to be rather nice. My dad bought it all and gave it to me as a present, which I kept and drank variously over the following 10, 15 years. So I think I've always had this attraction to Bordeaux blends, and its flavor profile is something that works well with me. I have been known to like the odd steak and stuff, and I'm probably more of a carnivore than a sort of omnivore, and so it kind of speaks to my lifestyle as well. And I think the idea of this wine, it shows off, phenomenally the vineyard and the particular terroir that we've got. And our little corner of Franschhoek, the Bohoek, is cracking for red varietals and Bordeaux varietals in particular. I mean, you've got Bogenhuis Kloof at the top of our farm, and they're obviously got a cab from Franschhoek and Cabernet Franc that are cracking. And you've got Stony Brook, and you've got La Brie and Haute Espoir. They've all got sort of good Bordeaux-style blends or Bordeaux-style components that they can produce in our little corner. So I think it had to be Cabernet driven. I think I like the idea of a Cabernet focused wine, but I think sometimes Cabernet by itself needs a little bit extra. It can get a little bit linear sometimes, and with the addition of the Merlot and the Cabernet Franc, it just kind of broadens it out and allows a greater intensity of flavors to develop. So that's kind of where it came from. And we enjoy making this wine. We enjoy blending it. It's one of the highlights of my year is the blending session for the Big G. And sometimes we don't quite get it right the first time, and then we go and try again, and then second and third time we pretty much nail it.
No, I was going to ask you, as it's got your name on, how much do you roll up your sleeves on this particular wine?
No, absolutely. I'm definitely pretty involved with this one.
The wine farms that you mentioned, Bogenhuis Kloof in particular, it's an estate that produces red wine that can last for a very long time, but it's also wine, especially I think of the Cabernet Sauvignon. It's one you can, if you want, drink 2 or 3 years into its existence. You might not be getting the very best out of what it may become a decade later, but it's already far more than approachable, and there is a softness and elegance to the wine. And I think although the Big G is a bigger style of wine, it's also one that while you want to hang on to it if you can hide it from your wife for long enough, it is something that you can get into at a relatively early age.
Yes, and that again, this is 2019, so it's 4 years old. So this is the new release. So we don't bring it out immediately, and it needs to have a decent amount of time because the wines are quite big, naturally quite big when they're made. And I think if we look back, we've managed to keep a library of everything from 2009 until the current date. And I mean, I had an amazing dinner with somebody drinking 2012, and then for the previous England game, I shared a 2015 Big G Magnum with a few friends, which was a lot of fun and obviously gave us a bit of good luck to have a victory. So it's definitely a wine that will mature gracefully. And the 2009, it's very fresh. It's really an enjoyable wine. So they've got plenty of time to go.
What about the evolution of the style of wine from where it started out as a Big G? Has it changed dramatically?
So it was pretty much 50-50 Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc to start with. And I think we found over time that actually the wine would benefit from having some Merlot added into the blend. So it was always going to be Cabernet Sauvignon dominant. And as we sort of tried with different levels of Merlot, it's a balance every year between our Cabernet Franc tends to be quite strong as Cabernet Franc comes. And so sometimes the flavors of the Cabernet Franc can overpower the other components. So you just have to dial it back a bit and then balance it out with the Merlot.
The combination is a lot of fun to drink. What about the making of it? You've got in Thierry, somebody who's made wine all over the world. How does he take the knowledge and experience from different places, bring it into Franschhoek, but not dissimilarly to bringing in a style of wine from Provence, ensure that he's still getting what is a distinctly Big G, Holden Manz style of wine out of this?
So I think there's two things to that. One is his understanding of the vineyard is critical. And when we first met and we first talked about working together, he basically spent 2 weeks just roaming the vineyard, and then he spent another week tasting everything we had in the cellar. And then he said, "Oh, maybe I think we can do something with this. We will try." And so he's very much a hands-on winemaker, cellar master, and he spends as much time in the vineyard as he does in the cellar. So he really does believe that good wine's made in the vineyard. And I think because he spent so much time working in Bordeaux, because, like, for example, at the moment he's doing harvest advisory work in Napa for 3 different wineries. So he's seeing what they're doing over there. He's been doing some work in Central Europe. He's been seeing what they're doing. He's been to Argentina. So he's worked in many different places. He obviously worked in South Africa a bit with Rupert and Rothschild before he came to us, before he came back and then came to us. And I think when you've had that level of international experience with a whole variety of different techniques, and obviously his mentor, Michel Roland, is one of the masters of the art. So in terms of having someone to guide you in terms of your development and your viticultural skills and your winemaking skills, I don't think you could have asked for a more powerful individual to guide him along his way. But it really does have a South African stamp on it, even though it's a classical left bank Bordeaux style. It's very much representing our corner of Franschhoek, and it represents the terroir that we've got there.
It also represents one half of what would be a fabulous meal. I'll ask you the same question I did with the rosé, the more conventional pairing, and then something a little more left of centre. So
last night we went to friends in Val de Vie, and they cooked a leg of lamb that they'd opened up, lemon juice on it, garlic. I'm sure it's not as good as your wife's lamb. But this was done on a braai, and it was just magnificent. And it was so simple. And we had a bottle of the 2019 to celebrate the new vintage. And it worked really, really well.
Sure.
So you'll taste with this wine, it is obviously still quite young. So the acidity level is reasonably high. But it's got loads of fruit. And I think that fruit combined with the sweetness of the lamb, it just really worked and complemented itself. So
I've had this with the lamb that I make at home and in the Greek style, and it is a great combination. Something a little different. What else could I try it with?
I'm trying to think of something away from the meat side. You know what? Actually, we did do for a dinner last year. We had a group of people who came for dinner in the house, and they didn't want to have meat for the main course, so we did tuna steaks. And we did a sort of mushroomy, peppery sauce with the tuna, and we served Big G with that. So that was.
I was thinking seared tuna, because I haven't had seared tuna with Pinot Noir, but I think this also.
So it's kind of, even though we call it, the name is Big G. It's not like a super heavy wine. It's compact and strong, but it's not overpowering.
Sort of the Oxenchair of wines.
Exactly.
For another welcome rugby reminder. All right. Before we do wrap up, and it's always a delight sharing wine and trading stories with you. I am preparing my cellar for this weekend, for the final. For the first of the knockout games, I drank some 2019 Ruston Freda in celebration of the 2019 World Cup victory. Over the weekend, a friend to us both, the late Big Rob Armstrong Haute-Espoir, had some 07 Haute-Espoir Cab and some 07 Columella, and actually some 07 Longridge Merlot, which was in remarkably good health from Jasper Raats, Perez's brother. I'm now looking at 1995. Any suggestions as to what I could be looking at from 1995? Drunk anything exciting of late?
That's Alto Rouge.
That actually could do the job perfectly.
From 95, might not be a bad.
I might need to put in a call to Berto Van der Veste and drag some up. All right, Alto Rouge, that's on my list. We'll welcome any other recommendations. So do send them through. It's all to help the Springboks get past the All Blacks at the Rugby World Cup final this weekend. We are champions at the moment of rugby. We're hoping we still will be this time next week. But we're definitely still going to be champions of wine. Just in closing, from the perspective of somebody who's spent time in France, who's travelled the world and has his own wine concern, where do we on a scale of 1 to 10 sit, I suppose, on where you think we could be in terms of our wine potential and the job we're doing in not just making great wine, but making the world understand we make great wine and getting them to buy it?
I think the main thing is to not be frightened to price the wine properly. I see a lot of wines in this country which are incredibly well made, taste great, but they're too cheap. And if that means that some people in this market can't afford them, maybe there's a differential in pricing to have a domestic price which is a bit lower than the international price, and have the international markets effectively subsidize the local market consumption. So I think we need to price properly, and we need to do regular tastings, blind tastings with other products from Argentina and Chile and France and Australia, and then mix them up and see really where we come out. And I think when you do that benchmarking exercise and you compare the pricing, I think we can justify having higher prices for our wines, especially in the export markets.
Yeah, it's a point that we had on the show just a few weeks ago where we spoke about how the term value is so often used as one of the selling points for South Africa, and it's actually a term we need to try and steer away from, because it does subconsciously say quality. Our wine is cheap.
We should focus on quality.
Yeah.
Like the rugby.
Exactly. Which we have done in both cases on Saturday and today. Lynn Proctor watching the show, thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks, Dan. Well, thank you for watching. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Not surprised, though, given the caliber of my guest and the wine he produces. Gerard, you're looking in remarkably good shape for somebody who was in a state of abject depression after 80 minutes on Saturday. So thanks for bouncing back. But I'd like to think that as much as you would have liked to see England, because you are such a firm, honorary South African, that the silver lining was not inconsiderable, and we'll have you in a Springbok jersey this weekend.
Absolutely. I'll be there shaking you around.
All right. Don't forget to look out for Gerard Holden at WineX this week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And not only will you be catching up with Gerard, you'll be catching up with winemakers from all over South Africa. And one of the great aspects of WineX is once you've tasted something and enjoyed it, you can buy it right there and then. And the team at WineX will have it off to you in the few days thereafter, which is why the following Monday, you'll suddenly have 17 cases of Cabernet Franc arrive that you bought at 8:30 on a Thursday night, and long may that continue. Also, just a quick word from Grant Sauls. Great show, Dan. Milas Trubicon 95 would be my recommendation, or a Van der Constance 95. Big fan of the Big G. You're not in a small group there. We're off to join some friends and fans of both Holden Manz and Norman Goodfellows here at the Fourways store. If you're in the area, you can join us tomorrow evening. I'll be back with the team from Krona for a tasting, and we've got Villiera next Tuesday as well. It's a lovely spot. There's some great wine, and it makes for a terrific evening, especially when your guest is a former international rugby star who now runs Franschhoek and makes some fantastic wine. That's it for today. We'll see you again for a very special live edition of Dan Really Likes Wine on Wednesday from the Santon Convention Centre at WineX, surrounded by wine, winemakers, and some very thirsty people. Have a great week. Good luck keeping the nerves in check for the rugby this weekend. This is Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. See you live on Wednesday, again on Thursday, and on Friday, live from Paul Kluver in Elgin as we launch the new 7 Flag series. It's a busy week. I have to drink plenty of wine, but I'll do it all for you. Cheers.